Hello there, I'm Father Fergal MacDonagh and welcome to Our Lady of Dolours parish in Dolphin's Barn. We're at the junction of South Circular Road and Dolphin Barn Street on the South Inner City in Dublin. You're very welcome. There's been a church here on this site for over 300 years. This is the third church on this site. We've celebrated Christmas many different ways in those years, but this year is different. 2020 is a much different year. We have lost so many people, and we think of those who are mourning and grieving this Christmas. Many young couples have had to postpone weddings. Our students have had a difficult year as well, with the junior and leaving cert exams. Grandparents and parents have had a difficult year as well, unable to hold and hug their children or grandchildren. We remember at this time of the year always people who are homeless. We still have that scourge in our community, in our city, our country. That's why this event is taking place. It's our way of trying to focus attention on the needs of homeless people. Later, you'll hear from Father Peter McVerry. But now I want to introduce you to the chairperson of our parish council. He's an actor. He's grown up here in Dolphin's Barn. Michael Judd. And happy Christmas, Michael.
Thanks, Fergal. Hello, everybody. Normally at this time of year, we give a public reading in the church of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, with 11 professional actors and 3 child actors. It lasts about an hour. It's free to attend, and there's food and tea, and of course, Father Fergal's mulled wine for the audience afterwards. Each year, Father Peter McVerry attends and speaks, and we have a collection for the homeless. It's become a much-loved event here in the parish, but unfortunately, due to COVID, we couldn't present it this year. Instead, we asked individual actors and some members of the parish if they would contribute a short seasonal reading or performance, and these pieces would then be put together to entertain you here. It's been a tough year for actors, but they all gave their talent freely for the cause to help the homeless. There might not be any theatre right now, but there is still love. And as Belfast-born poet Nikita Gill says, there is still poetry. Here's Lorna Quinn.
Love in the Time of Coronavirus by Nikita Gill. Today we stockpile empathy. We supply love and good energy. We sing to each other across buildings. We say, I love you through social distancing. Do you know that writing letters to our friends is back in fashion? And that we finally have time to read more books, whether historical or fiction? My cousin told me she hadn't seen such a blue sky in her city before. My uncle went on his first walk in the woods. He heard a bird sing since the first time he went to war. Even in sickness, this world is allowed to be beautiful, and we are still allowed to love it, for there is always room for hope. This is just me checking in, sending you the moon as a poem, praying and wishing for us all a speedy recovery. And if nothing else, there will always be poetry. We will always have poetry.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. Next year all our troubles will be out of sight. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. Next year all our troubles will be miles away. Once again, as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us can be near to us once more. Someday soon we all will be together if the fates allow. Until then we'll have to muddle through somehow. So have yourself a merry little Christmas now. Once again, as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Many friends who are dear to us can be near to us once more. Someday soon we all will be together if the fates allow. Until then we'll have to muddle through somehow. So have yourself a merry little Christmas now.
Paul O'Grady Lee there with her daughter Nancy on guitar. Lovely. We hope all of you watching will have a very Merry Christmas too. Now, here's local historian Kathy Scoffle to tell us about Christmas Eve over the years in Dolphin's Barn.
At Dolphin's Barn Christmas. Christmas was always a special time, full of tradition and memories that last a lifetime. Christmas Eve was especially so, Dubliners' day out in the city centre. This was the day we went into Henry Street as a family for last-minute shopping, usually running into other members of the extended family in town on the same errand. The end result of the long conversations were promises of a catch-up over the break. The buses stopped early, so getting home was a priority. If the last bus was missed, it was a walk home with the various parcels and bags through the Liberties and around the back of Guinness's. Once back in the house, time for a last-minute tidy-up, and most importantly, setting the good table in the parlour with all the best cutlery and china being brought out. Mam would at this time be wrestling with the turkey, which threatened annually not to fit in either the dish or the oven. The hours flew by with everyone busy with their last-minute jobs, but soon it was new clothes and new shoes on and down to the barn for midnight mass. The pealing of Lawrence Byrne's church bell, threatening to drown out the catch-up with family members, friends and neighbours. It was never lonely on the barn. Dolphin's Barn Chapel would always be packed, with everyone looking their best, with a happy atmosphere all around, and the choir singing, adding to the sense of occasion. When the Mass was over, everyone made their way to the crib, the little ones being lifted up so they could see all the figures now in place. Before leaving the church, it was essential to get a small piece of new yellow straw to bring home to add to those gathered in previous years, all placed in the family crib, marking the end of one year and the fresh beginning of another. The barn village itself always took on a new air each Christmas as we walked the short distance home after Mass. Each terraced house would have a candle burning in the window to welcome the friend and stranger equally on this most special of nights. Ours would be lit by the youngest in the house, usually one of my cousins, who would also get the special privilege of putting the baby Jesus in the crib, which had pride of place in the window. The crib itself would be lit by the final Christmas tree light, which was always a challenge, but also a necessity, as plug points at home before the big rewire were a luxury. When the jobs were done and the turf fires lit in the parlour and the sitting room, it was time for a late supper with the various family members we had gathered up at the Barn Chapel. First thing on the table was the Christmas pudding, fresh from the calico cloth it had hung in from the top landing for the previous few weeks. And being Dubliners, the key ingredient was, of course, black Guinness stout, which gave it a deep black colour and preserved the fruit perfectly. The Christmas cake, my mum's special recipe, was next to be served, fruity with loads of homemade almond paste and white icing. The cake was generously laced with Paris whiskey, another local product from their distillery in the heart of the Liberties. When Christmas Eve supper was over, our visitors departed home to make their own preparations for the big day ahead. Fond goodbyes with warnings to watch out for Santy, especially to those heading towards Francis Street, where the Church of St. Nicholas of Myra stood in honour to St. Nicholas himself. A promise of presents and a happy day ahead was enough to get everyone to bed quickly and with no fuss. Yes, Christmas was always a special time in Dolphin's Barn.
Thank you, Kathy. Now, just a few streets away from this church is Ebenezer Terrace, the only Ebenezer in Dublin. We asked Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge if he would like to take part in this event, but all he said was, "Bah, humbug." So instead, we asked Mr. George Bernard Shaw in the guise of the wonderful Bosco Hogan.
The following is an extract from one of George Bernard Shaw's pieces of musical criticism, and it's dated December 1893. Like all intelligent people, I greatly dislike Christmas. It revolts me to see a whole nation refrain from music for weeks together in order that every man may rifle his neighbour's pockets under cover of a ghastly general pretense of festivity. It really is an atrocious institution, this Christmas. We must be gluttonous because it is Christmas. We must be drunken because it is Christmas. We must be insincerely generous. We must buy things that nobody wants and give them to people we don't like. We must go to absurd entertainments that make even our little children satirical. We must writhe under venal officiousness from legions of freebooters, all because it is Christmas. That is, because the mass of the population, including the all-powerful middle-class tradesmen, depend on a week of license and brigandage, waste and intemperance, to clear off its outstanding liabilities at the end of the year. As for me, I shall fly from it all tomorrow or next day to some remote spot miles from a shop, where nothing worse can befall me than a serenade from a few peasants, or some equally harmless medieval mummery, shyly proffered, not advertised, moderate in its expectations, and soon over. In town, there is for the moment nothing for me or any honest man to do. But a very Merry Christmas to you all.
Very Scrooge-like. As you know, in Dickens's story, Ebenezer Scrooge is visited by 3 ghosts. 4, actually. Don't forget Jacob Marley. That's the part I normally play in our reading. But I wasn't asked this year. In this excerpt from A Christmas Carol, the ghost of Christmas yet to come shows Scrooge what could happen if he doesn't get his act together.
The phantom led Scrooge to an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offences of smell and dirt and life upon the struggling streets. And the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery.
Far in this den of infamous resort was a low-browed beetling shop below a penthouse roof, where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Sitting in among the wares he dealt in, by a charcoal stove made of old brick, was a grey-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, and smoking his pipe with all the luxury of calm retirement.
Well, Mrs. Dilber, what have you got for me?
Something a dead man don't need, old Joe. Or if he wanted to keep him after he was dead, wicked old screw. Well, wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd had somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying, gasping out his last, alone, by himself.
The truest word that ever was spoke, I'm sure. It's a judgment on him. Now,
Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain.
very well. I always give too much to the ladies. It's a weakness of mine. And that's the way I ruin myself. Now, what do you call this? Bed curtains.
Bed curtains.
You don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with him still lying there?
Yes, I do. Why not?
You were born to make your fortune, Mrs. Dilber.
I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can get anything in it by reaching out. For the sake of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe. I don't drop that all upon the blankets now.
His blankets?
Whose else's do you think? He ain't likely to take cold without them, I dare say.
I hope he didn't die of anything catching. Aye.
Don't you be afraid of that. No, I ain't so fond of him that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find an hole in it. It's the best he had, and a fine one too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What do you call wasting of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Somebody was foolish enough to do it, but I took it off again. This is the end, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
Oh, you can feel the cold. Though I still think we should have had Jacob Marley's ghost. Anyway, that was Deirdre Monaghan and Gerard Byrne as Mrs. Dilber and Old Joe. Super stuff. Now, our usual Scrooge each year is actor Karl O'Neill, but this year he's setting aside London for Monaghan. Here he is performing A Christmas Childhood by Patrick Kavanagh, recorded here recently on the poet's anniversary.
One side of the potato pits was white with frost. How wonderful that was. How wonderful. And when we put our ears to the paling post, the music that came out was magical. The light between the ricks of hay and straw was a hole in heaven's gable. An apple tree with its December glinting fruit we saw. Oh, you, Eve, were the world that tempted me to eat the knowledge that grew in clay, and death the germ within it. Now and then I can remember something of the gay garden that was childhood's. Again, the tracks of cattle to a drinking place, a green stone lying sideways in a ditch, or any common sight, the transfigured face of a beauty that the world did not touch. My father played the melodeon outside at our gate. There were stars in the morning east, and they danced to his music. Across the wild bogs, his melodeon called to Lennons and Callans. As I pulled on my trousers in a hurry, I knew some strange thing had happened. Outside in the cowhouse, my mother made the music of milking. The light of her stable lamp was a star, and the frost of Bethlehem made it twinkle. A water hen screeched in the bog. Mass-going feet crunched the wafer ice on the potholes. Somebody wistfully twisted the bellows wheel. My child poet picked out the letters on the grey stone. In silver, the wonder of a Christmas townland, the winking glitter of a frosty dawn. Cassiopeia was over Cassidy's hanging hill. I looked, and 3 wind bushes rode across the horizon, the 3 wise kings. An old man passing said, "Can't he make it talk?
the melodeon. I hid in the doorway and tightened the belt of my box-pleated coat. I nicked 6 nicks on the doorpost with my penknife's big blade. There was a little one for cutting tobacco. And I was 6 Christmases of age. My father played the melodeon. My mother milked the cows. And I had a prayer like a white rose pinned on the Virgin Mary's blouse.
Hello. Many years ago now, many decades ago in fact, there was an Irish emigrant far away, and he was asked, "How often do you return home?" And he said, "Every few hours." Home, in a way, it's the soundtrack of our lives. It resonates. The troops in the First World War sang "Home Sweet Home" in the trenches. We have home comforts, we have home truths, we have homeless. And when I think of homeless, I think of Peter McVerry and such people who do so much for so many at Christmas time. John, Howard, Wayne, Home Sweet Home. Made pleasures on the palaces, though we may roam, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. A charm from the sky seemed to hallow us there. We'd seek through the world is ne'er met with elsewhere. Home, home, sweet, sweet home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. An exile in splendor dazzles in vain. Oh, give me that lowly cottage again. The birds singing gaily that come at my call. Give me them with that peace of mind, dearer than all. Home, 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 sweet home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Happy Christmas.
Noel O'Grady there, who just lives down the road with Home Sweet Home. Now, there was a mention in the Patrick Kavanagh piece of 3 wise kings. And here's one of them in T.S. Eliot's Journey of the Magi, read by Phelim Drew.
A cold coming we had of it. just the worst time of year for a journey. And such a long journey. The ways deep and the weather sharp. The very dead of winter. And the camels galled, sore-footed, refractory, lying down in the melting snow. There were times we regretted the summer palaces on slopes, the terraces, the silken girls bringing sherbet. Then the camel men, cursing and grumbling, and running away, and wanting their liquor and women. And the night fires going out, and the lack of shelters, the cities hostile, and the towns unfriendly, the villages dirty, and charging high prices. A hard time we had of it. At the end, we preferred to travel light, sleeping in snatches, with the voices ringing in our ears saying, this was all folly. Then at dawn, we came down to a temperate valley, wet, below the snow line, smelling of vegetation, and a running stream, and a watermill beating in the darkness, and 3 trees on the low sky, and an old white horse galloped away in the meadow. Then we came to a tavern with vine leaves over the lintel, 6 hands at an open door dicing for pieces of silver, and feet kicking the empty wineskins. But there was no information. And so we continued. And arriving at evening, not a moment too soon, finding the place, it was, you may say, satisfactory. All this was a long time ago, I remember, and I would do it again. But set down this. Set down this. Were we led all that way for birth or death? There was a birth, certainly. We had evidence and no doubt. I had seen birth and death, but had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. We returned to our places, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here in the old dispensation, with an alien people clutching their gods. I should be glad of another death.
Thanks, Phelim. Birth and death. It's that time of the year, as Sharon Hogan considers in her next piece, written by herself and preceded by Shakespeare's sonnet number 73.
That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none or few, do hang upon those boughs that shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self, which seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire as on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceiv'st, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. And so it's December, with its dark progress towards the promise of a bright new year, if God spares us. A friend of mine always prefaces our arrangements for the future. Well, God has been able to do without us for another month anyway. December, the darkest month with the shortest days, the month which holds the dying fall of the closing year, and the month which holds the celebration of the birth of light, darkness and light, frost and fires, death and birth, beautifully balanced in this, the last of the ember months. Tibetan Buddhists have a daily practice in which a chant is repeated over and over again. Death is real. It comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. This daily reminder of the inevitability of death is not a morbid one. On the contrary, its purpose is to help them to be born consciously into every moment of life, to really be alive to each encounter, each event, each breath. The more steadily they gaze at the reality of impermanence, the fresher and more precious each fleeting moment is known to be. In every spiritual tradition, aren't birth and death constantly dancing together? In the sciences too, it's a law of nature that nothing is ever lost. That energy can be transformed, but it cannot be destroyed. Physicists, geologists, astronomers, the singer Joni Mitchell tell us that we are stardust, immortal stardust, now manifesting in one form, now manifesting in another, ending as this and beginning as that. We are the very same matter as the star that led 3 wise men to the cribside of a newborn over 2 millennia ago. And that newborn, that Christ child whose birth celebration December holds, wasn't he born in order to die? And didn't he die in order to live? Isn't everything and everyone constantly in the process of dying and being born and dying in every moment? Birth, death, death, birth. This is the dance of December. This is the dance of life.
Sharon Hogan. Now, another actor with writing talent is Gabriel Byrne. Here Gerard Lee reads from Byrne's book, Pictures in My Head, about some recollections of Christmas in Dublin.
Christmas Eve, cigarette smoke fogs the snug of Mooney's Crumlin. Tidal rise and fall of song and laughter. Postmen sink pints and slag us, their sissy student helpers of 10 days past. Army-coated amateurs, we braved the dogs of Walkinstown as we humped our sacks to the sleeping houses. Seeing dark of night turn into the grey of morning under the lights of the Ballymount Road. Give us a song, I will in me. Her eyes, they shone like diamonds. Ah, fair play to you, sunshine. See us next year, lads. Not if we can help it. Every year, Auntie Kay sends a turkey from Kildare. It's hanging now from our kitchen wall. The beak scrapes against my hand. I shiver. The paper star turns the hallway red. We meet at the roundabout, Joe, Pat, Dave and me, trousers creased into offensive weapons. Smelling of Christmas present brute, we lounge across the seats of the 77 like gunslingers. Fares, please. Dame Street, keep the change. It's Christmas. 12 chin Doberman conductor with Santa Claus cheeks. To get up of yous, I hope it keeps fine for yous. Feed off of them seats, bowsies. Skip before the stop, out onto the pavement, neat as a bird landing on a branch. Greenbacks in our pockets, courtesy of the P&T. Now, lads, the crawl is your only man, from Goiny's to the halfway house. We head up the carol-singing street. Hitler press, Hitler press. The smell from Bewley's, the laughing, linking girls. Get the last of the cheeky Charlies. So many pubs, so many pints, so many Christmases. And suddenly it's 11:30. On the drunken, homeward swaying bus, a man starts singing, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. He thinks he's Bing Crosby, says Joe, but everybody listens. And when he finishes, we all clap and stamp our feet and shout, give us another one, Bing. Through the fogged up windows, the lights of the houses pass quickly as all the other Christmases of our lives. The man starts to sing, Adeste fideles, but he winds down like a gramophone, not remembering the words. Someone starts to sing, you made me love you, I didn't want to do it. We all join in, swaying from side to side and polishing imaginary windows like sunny knolls. Then the silence of Christmas Eve, the roundabout again. Happy Christmas, Joe. See you tomorrow. A good bit away, I hear them singing in the church. Midnight Mass. A bell tolls. The clock ticks in our hallway. A light from the dying fire flickers on the walls. A car passes. Stillness again. Soon the room is dark, except for the candles burning in the window. I'm tired. I lay my head against the cool pane. Soon it will be Christmas morning.
Gerard Lee there with a piece by Gabriel Byrne, who is of course based in America. And it's to a famous American poet we turn to next, Emily Dickinson. These two lovely short poems are spoken by a young member of our parish, Rosemary Vincent, and a very, very young girl from the Dublin Academy of Dramatic Arts, Daisy Lyons.
If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one the pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain.
Before the Ice is in the Pot by Emily Dickinson. Before the ice is in the pools, before the skaters go, or any check at nightfall is tarnished by the snow. Before the fields have finished, before the Christmas tree, wonder upon wonder will arrive to me.
How lovely. Thank you, Rosemary and Daisy. Let's now cross back over the Atlantic and go to Wales, which here in the church means we go up to the choir balcony for an excerpt from A Child's Christmas in Wales by Dylan Thomas. Take it away, Marcus Lamb.
Years and years and years ago, when I was a boy, when there were wolves in Wales, and birds the colour of red flannel petticoats whisked past the harp-shaped hills, when we sang and wallowed all night and day in caves that smelt like Sunday afternoons in damp front farmhouse parlours, and we chased with the jawbones of deacons the English and the bears, before the motor car, before the wheel, before the duchess-faced horse, when we rode the daft and happy hills bareback, it snowed and it snowed. But here a small boy says, "It snowed last year too. I made a snowman and my brother knocked it down and I knocked my brother down and then we had tea." Ah, but that was not the same snow, I say. Our snow was not only shaken from whitewash buckets down the sky, it came shawling out of the ground and swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. Snow grew overnight on the roofs of the houses like a pure and grandfather moss, minutely white-ivied the walls and settled on the postman like a dumb, numb thunderstorm of white, torn Christmas cards. Were there postmen then too? With sprinkling eyes and wind-cherried noses, on spread frozen feet they crunched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully, but all that the children could hear was the ringing of bells. You mean that the postman went rat-a-tat-tat and the doors rang? I mean that the bells that the children could hear were inside them. I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells. There were church bells too. Inside them? No, in the bat-black, snow-white belfries, tugged by bishops and storks, and they rang their tidings over the bandaged town, over the frozen foam of the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling sea. It seemed that all the churches boomed for joy under my window, and the weathercocks crew for Christmas on our fence. Get back to the postmen. They were just ordinary postmen, fond of walking and dogs and Christmas and the snow. They knocked on the doors with blue knuckles. Ours has got a knocker. And they stood in the white welcome mat, in the little drifted Porsches, and huffed and puffed, making ghosts with their breath, and jogged from foot to foot like small boys wanting to go out. And then the presents, after the Christmas box. And the cold postman, with a rose on his button nose, tingled down the tea-tray slithered run of the chilly glinting hill. He went on his icebound boots like a man on fishmonger's slabs. He wagged his bag like a frozen camel's hump, dizzily turned the corner on foot, and by God, he was gone. Get back to the presents. There were useful presents, engulfing mufflers of the old coach days, and mittens made for giant slots, zebra scarves of a substance like silky gum that could be tug-o-warred down to the galoshes, blinding tam-o'-shanters like patchwork tea-cozies, and bunny-suited busbies, and balaclavas for victims of head-shrinking tribes from aunts who always wore wool next to the skin. There were moustached and rasping vests that made you wonder why the aunts had any skin left at all. And once I had a little crocheted nosebag from an aunt, now alas, no longer whinnying with us. And pictureless books in which small boys, though warned with quotations not to, would skate on Farmer Giles' pond, and did, and drowned. And books that told me everything about the wasp, except why.
One of the perennial Christmas favourites. Thanks, Marcus. Now, from a classic to a brand new, a world premiere, in fact, with Roxanna Nic Liam and her own work, A Dublin Carol.
Come all ye faithful and unfaithful. Do you see what I see? The dregs, the ignored, the downtrodden, the disdained, the overlooked, the forgotten, the drunkards, the addicts, the down on their luck, the people swallowed by the city and spat out again, the families who've resorted to sleeping in their cars, the people sleeping in hostels and on couches, because this city is completely unaffordable and inaccessible. Do they know it's Christmas? Of course they do. How could they not? The very streets they walk and sometimes sleep on have been lit with the promise of packaged joy. So, joy to the world. Sing joy, joy, joy. Because Mary's had a little boy, therefore people must manically buy toy after toy. God rest ye merry gentlemen, because tonight you get to rest in a sleeping bag outside a beautifully decorated shop front. Diamond Tay decorations on a busy shopping street. Ah, what a treat. As you sleep in a cold, hard pavement on the cruel concrete streets. And do you hear what I hear? Not silver bells or jingle bells or Christmas cheer, but the sobs of a suffering woman with nowhere to go, who has lost all hope. Or the strained cries of an addict whose voice is strangled by the drugs he's put in his body as a way to cope. Or the whispers of a couple in a tent who hope that body warmth will be enough to get them through a bleak midwinter. Hark, the herald angels sing. Angels we have heard on high. Angels from the realms of glory. Angels 2 for €1. A cheap plastic piece of tat to put on your tree that'll probably be thrown out in a couple of weeks. And not to get all Tiny Tim about it, but we need to remember what Christmas is all about. Look to that angel on your Christmas tree and Mary's boy child in the Nativity. Jesus Christ, a homeless child lying in a manger. Mary, a pregnant, displaced refugee whose child was in danger, told no room at the inn, but it was the kindness of a few strangers that made all the difference. Wise men and shepherds looking to the star of the east, a star of hope, to guide us. Well, where is our hope? Where is our star of the east? 'Cause I'll be home for Christmas at least, but not everyone will be. If we close our eyes, we're closing our hearts as well to the systematic problems that surround us. How do we make sure that our heads are turned to the star and not buried in the sand? Well, it's a total cliche to say, but we need to be the change that we want to see in the world. And not just at this time of year, but every day. Because do you know what I know? You can always find the kindness in humanity if you look close enough. And it's a powerful thing too. We can't just look for the helpers or the wise men. We need to be them. We need to demonstrate charity and empathy and selflessness in our actions. Where is our hope? Our power of love? A force from above? No. A power within. It's within us. We are our hope, our Christmas miracles, our real-life angels, our stars of the East.
There you have it, the first performance of a Dublin carol by Roxanna Nic Liam. Of course, we can hardly have a celebration of Christmas without a reading about a certain birth in Bethlehem. Nigerian-born Elvis Onaifo will read from the Gospel of St. Luke after a lovely short poem read by the poet himself, John O'Donnell.
This is a poem called A Carol. At midnight, the faint sound of a scuffle high up on icy slates. Fantastic hooves wobble, trying to balance in the muffle of imagined snow on childhood roofs, which, if fable, we invented for ourselves as much as for the faces that peer after. We thrill to tell of reindeers and of elves, that we may watch small eyes grow big, hear laughter, and learn again that what sustains the heart is not the proof, but wanting to believe. As we brighten dark days with stories of a start that seems improbable, birth on a winter's eve, we sing of tonight under the starry heaven, waiting again for the miraculous to happen.
A reading from the Gospel of St. Luke. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that the whole world should be enrolled. This was the first enrollment when Quirinius was governor of Syria. So all went to be enrolled, each to his own town. And Joseph too went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, that is called Bethlehem, because he was one of the house and family of David, to be enrolled with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. While they were there, the time came for her to have a child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now there were shepherds in that region, living in the fields and keeping the night watch over their flock. The angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were struck with great fear. The angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I proclaim to you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. For today in the city of David, a Savior has been born for you, who is Messiah and Lord. And this will be a sign for you. You will find an infant wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger." And suddenly there was a multitude of the heavenly host with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests." When the Lord went away from them to heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go then to Bethlehem to see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went in haste and found Mary and Joseph and the infant lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known the message that had been told them about this child. All who heard it were amazed by what they had been told them by the shepherds. And Mary kept all these things, reflecting on them in her heart. Then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, just as it had been told to them. The Gospel of the Lord.
In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan, heart stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Yet what I can I give him, give my heart, give my heart.
John O'Donnell, Elvis Onaifo, and there the carol in the bleak midwinter, sung by head chorister Sean Hayden from Dublin's Pro Cathedral. Now, next up is an actor, the less said about him, the better. So we filmed him way down at the back of the church on the stairway. 'Twas the night before Christmas.
'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief, and I in my cap, had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Dollar and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all! As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then, in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my hand and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur, from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he'd flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry, his droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night."
Is he finished? Are you sure? Good. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we're doing all this to try and do a little something to help the homeless on our streets. They're still there, COVID or no COVID, to our shame, really. This next song was inspired by the people Ralph MacTell met on the streets of Paris, but he changed the title to Streets of London. It could equally be called Streets of Dublin.
Have you seen the old man in the closed down market, kicking up the papers with his worn out shoes? In his eyes you see no pride, hanging loosely at his side. Yesterday's papers telling yesterday's news. So how can you tell me you're lonely and say for you that the sun don't shine? Let me take you by the hand and lead you to the streets of London. I'll show you something to make you change your mind. Have you seen the old dear who walks the streets of London? Dirt in her hair and her clothes in rags. She's no time for talking, she just keeps right on walking, carrying her home in two carrier bags. So how can you tell me you're lonely and say for you that the sun don't shine? Let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of London. I'll show you something to make you change your mind. In the all-night cafe at 11:15, same old man sitting there on his own, looking at the world over the rim of his teacup. And each tea lasts an hour, and he wanders home alone. So how can you tell me you're lonely and say for you that the sun don't shine? Let me take you by the hand and lead you to the streets of London. I'll show you something to make you change your mind. So how can you tell me you're lonely and say for you that the sun don't shine? Let me take you by the hand and lead you to the streets of London. I'll show you something to make you change your mind. I'll show you something to make you change your mind.
Wasn't that a little gem there? Lennon and Lionel, who often perform at our Sunday Taizé Mass here in Dolphin's Barn, with Ralph MacTell's classic ballad, written while he was backpacking in France. And Francis where, a few years ago, the Irish poet and philosopher John O'Donoghue died at the age of 52. We remember him now with his poem, This is the Time to Be Slow, with P.J. Brady.
Time to be slow. This is the time to be slow. Lie low to the wall until the bitter weather passes. Try as best you can not to let the wire brush of doubt scrape from your heart all sense of yourself and your hesitant light. If you remain generous, time will come good, and you will find your feet again on fresh pastures of promise, where the air will be kind and blushed with beginning.
The ever-spiritual John O'Donoghue's This is the Time to Be Slow. Thanks, PJ. Each Bloomsday in Dolphin's Barn, the home, of course, of Molly Tweedy, she that married Leopold Bloom, don't you know? Each year, just opposite the church here, we have readings of the great James Joyce. Alas, this year's event had to be cancelled. But to give you a flavour, here's Andrea Irvine with an excerpt from that wonderful short story, The Dead.
The air of the room chilled his shoulders. He stretched himself cautiously along under the sheets and lay down beside his wife. One by one, they were all becoming shades. Better pass boldly into that other world in the full glory of some passion than fade and wither dismally with age. He thought of how she who lay beside him had locked in her heart for so many years that image of her lover's eyes when he had told her that he did not wish to live. Generous tears filled Gabriel's eyes. He had never felt like that himself towards any woman, but he knew that such a feeling must be love. The tears gathered more thickly in his eyes, and in the partial darkness he imagined he saw the form of a young man standing under a dripping tree. Other forms were near. His soul had approached that region where dwell the vast hosts of the dead. He was conscious of but could not apprehend their wayward and flickering existence. His own identity was fading out into a grey, impalpable world. The solid world itself, which these dead had one time reared and lived in, was dissolving and dwindling. A few light taps upon the pane made him turn to the window. It had begun to snow again. He watched sleepily the flakes, silver and dark, falling obliquely against the lamplight. The time had come for him to set out on his journey westward. Yes, the newspapers were right. Snow was general all over Ireland. It was falling on every part of the dark central plain, on the treeless hills, falling softly upon the bog of Allen and farther westward, softly falling into the dark, mutinous Shannon waves. It was falling too upon every part of the lonely churchyard on the hill where Michael Fury lay buried. It lay thickly drifted on the crooked crosses and headstones, on the spears of the little gate, on the barren thorns. His soul swooned slowly as he heard the snow falling faintly through the universe, and faintly falling, like the descent of their last end upon all the living and the dead.
Thanks, Andrea. Nearing the end now. Here are two of the most loved winter poems. Robert Frost's Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening with Sam McGovern. But first, Christina Rossetti's In the Bleak Midwinter, which we heard earlier in Gustav Holst's arrangement. This is the original poem, as read by another young Dublin Academy of Dramatic Arts student, Sonny Cooling.
In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow, snow on snow, in the bleak midwinter, long ago. Our God, heaven cannot hold him, nor earth sustain. Heaven and earth shall flee away when he comes to reign. In the bleak midwinter, a stable place sufficed, the Lord God Almighty, Jesus Christ. Enough for him whom cherubim worship night and day, breast full of milk and a manger full of hay. Enough for him whom angels fall before, the ox and ass and camel which adore. Angels and archangels may have gathered there, cherubims and seraphim throng the air, but his mother only, in her maiden bliss, worship the beloved with a kiss. What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what I can, I give him, give my heart.
Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep.
Thanks, Sonny and Sam. A man, I'm sure, who has miles to go before he sleeps, he does such Trojan work, is Father Peter McVerry. And this is the reason we've put all this together. First, a word from Peter himself.
Once again, I would like to thank everyone involved in this Christmas carol. For many years now, you have raised funds for our work for homeless people, and we very, very much appreciate what you have done. This year it has to be different, unfortunately, but I want to thank you again for taking part in it. I'd like to thank all the actors who are taking part in this, giving their time free in order to help our work. So again, as in previous years, unfortunately I cannot be there this year, but as in previous years, I do want to say a very, very heartfelt thank you to everyone organising and taking part in this, and to indeed all those who will contribute to our work with homeless people as a result of this event. The money you are raising is invaluable in helping us to continue and expand our work with homeless people. This year we'll be adding over 150 homes for homeless people, and some of them will be coming through just before Christmas and will be a wonderful Christmas present for about 20 families or individuals who will be moving into their own home, perhaps for the first time or perhaps after many, many years of homelessness. So thank you for your support, which enables this to happen. I appreciate very much what you have done over the years and again what you are doing this year. Thank you to all of you.
What important work that man does. Before we finish with some seasonal music played by the Metropolitan Concert Band, please take note of the link below the screen here and do try and give something, anything, however small, to assist the Peter McVerry Trust in helping the homeless this Christmas. We know it's been a rough year for everyone, but give if you can. And from all of us here in Dolphin's Barn Church, actors and musicians and parishioners, we wish you a wonderful and above all a safe Christmas time with all our love.
One, 2, 3.